Playing that fateful day. And he has written a book. Ron Eckerman. Called Turn It Up. He was the tour manager in the mid-70s, 75 to 77, the peak years for Skynyrd, obviously. And he was in studio yesterday, and here's part one of my interview. The author of Turn It Up, Life, Love, and Death, Southern Style, writing about Skynyrd, Ron Eckerman in studio. Ron was on the plane and one of the survivors of that horrific plane crash that happened back in 1977. Welcome to the show, man.
Well, thank you, Billy. I appreciate that.
It's good to have you. You got a very deep radio type voice there.
This is my radio voice.
Are you a former radio guy?
No, but I've sat on some turntables in radio stations in the old days.
Right.
Created a bit of dead air, so they try to keep me out of the stations.
Yeah, I remember the record days. In fact, I've been here 21 years, and we were still playing a couple of records over at the old place, the Fort Hill building, whenever I came, but it was mainly all CDs then. Of course, now it's all on computer. But how times have changed in radio. Well, now, for you, this book, I haven't had a chance to read it. You've actually got this out in paperback form, and then you've got also an audio book. And I haven't had a chance to read it. I wanted to get the book and get you in studio a couple of days later after I had a chance to hit some of the highlights. But since you wrote it, we'll just let you take care of that.
Okay.
What are your thoughts about, and when you think about it, especially when the anniversary rolls around in 77, what are some of your more fond thoughts of participating with Lynyrd Skynyrd?
I tell you, they became my closest family.
Mm-hmm.
Ronnie Van Zant was like a brother to me.
Right.
We were very, very close. I enjoyed them tremendously, loved every one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I had a fairly special relationship with Ronnie especially.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of misinformation out there. And so one of the things that spurred me to write this book, it took 35 years to get it out there.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing was I was just in recovery, a lot of stress, post-traumatic stress syndrome, all that, multiple surgeries,
right,
from plane crash leftovers.
Yeah.
And I finally looked around and everybody was kind of dying one by one over the years.
Right.
I thought, well, I better get to this. It's time to get this out.
Yep, because once Gary Rosington's gone, then that's pretty much, he's the last of the Mohicans, as they say.
He's the last one.
And but the band still rolls on. You know, they still pack out places and still going, which is, quite a compliment to them to be able to carry on the legacy of Lynyrd Skynyrd and keep the dream alive. Now, tell people what you did with the band for the band.
I was their tour manager.
Okay.
And then I also worked for their management company.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of had a dual role, and I handled their management as well as their tours.
Right.
So it was an interesting situation.
I bet.
And in fact, when the band found out that I was working for their management company as well as for them personally, they were a little offended. A couple of members of the band were offended.
Oh, they didn't know?
They did not know.
Wow.
And Ronnie came to my rescue, actually. As Gary and Alan came screaming into a hotel room one day, we know. They were all over me. And so Ronnie just, he lied for me.
Yeah.
He said, no, I made him get that job so we'd have a spy up there.
Aha! That's a good idea.
Yeah, so it worked out.
So everybody was on the same team. Hit some of the, now you said there's a lot of misconceptions. I know that one misconception that a lot of folks have, because Gene Odom is a friend of mine. I've had him on the radio a few times, and he told me, everybody assumed that Ronnie died from injuries in the plane crash. And Gene told me that that's not true, that he actually smothered from all the bodies and all equipment and things being piled on top of him.
I believe that he died from an impact injury.
Really?
To his head.
Okay.
That was what the reports were. I was out of it. I didn't wake up for several weeks after the crash.
Wow.
But as I was walking out or being dragged out of that crash site, I did see Ronnie lying on the ground.
Right.
He looked like he was sleeping comfortably, to tell you the truth. Couldn't see any injuries.
Didn't see any injuries on him. Gene had told me that he only had one little cut on his neck, maybe just about a half an inch or something like that. So maybe just head trauma? Is that what?
That's what all the medical people give us as.
Right.
They said it was head trauma.
Wow. So that is another misconception that needs to be debunked. What are some other ones?
Oh, there were all kinds of things. There was one report that someone had their throat slashed ear to ear and bled out. And that, as far as I know, that wasn't the case.
Right.
Again, I have to rely on reports from other people because I was out for a long time and about a year in recovery.
Wow.
So it, as everything filters down to me over the years, I've tried to hash it all out.
Right. All right, very good. Part 2 of my interview with Ron Eckerman coming up after the next extra long block of classic rock on IMZ. Misconceptions that people have that aren't true.
Well, one thing that's interesting is everybody, Lynyrd Skynyrd had that reputation of being a rough and rowdy band and getting in fights with people all across the country.
Right, drinking, drugging, and all that business.
Yeah, well, the drinking and drugging, there's a little truth to that. But the fighting, they really fought with each other more than anything.
Right.
They didn't take on outsiders. They had plenty of fights inside the band.
Which is typical for bands.
Absolutely.
Always has been, which I've never understood that, especially when you're a tremendous success. You would think everybody would just be happy and flying high and just really loving life. But there's a lot of politics that goes on in bands, a lot of money issues, and things like that. So you can see how, just same with people in any business that are partners, they go through their ups and downs with things like that. What I hate, and I don't even ask Gene this anymore when I talk to him because I know that you probably hate to relive it. But it's a legendary story of how it went down. And, I understand that from this, here again, maybe a myth, but it was an issue with, the pilots didn't want to repair the plane when they left to head to Mississippi or heading, I guess, going to Louisiana, and the plane, of course, went down in Mississippi. But the way I understand it, there was an issue with one of the engines running rich, and it was burning too much fuel. Is that the case?
That is correct. And I've talked to a lot of pilots, a lot of friends, commercial pilots, and this and that. Myself, I would not be afraid to fly in that plane today, provided it was in proper repair.
Right.
Good solid flight.
Which should have happened before it took off. So what we had a faulty magneto in one engine. I called around and made sure that wasn't a danger. And each engine had 2 magnetos. We could run easily on one engine. So it wasn't a huge concern, especially because we had the part flown into the next show. Right.
So I was responsible for us taking off that day, loading up the plane. I was the only one that could ground it.
Right.
I didn't. Of course, I regret that decision to this day.
But you were told that everything was okay.
I was told that everything was okay, and a lot of pilots that I've talked to in the last year have said, "Oh, that's one of the best planes ever made." And you can put them down anywhere. So what happened is the pilots, they weren't calculating their fuel properly.
Right.
Because you don't fly a plane with a whole load of fuel. You don't fill them up and fly them. It's terribly expensive, and it's just a waste of money.
Right.
You take on enough fuel to get to your destination, plus some safety.
And I guess you get better mileage if you don't have a full load.
Exactly.
It doesn't weigh as much.
Yeah, it's just economy.
Right.
It's a logical way to do it. Unfortunately, these pilots made some errors in their fuel calculation.
Right.
And pilots normally, they use a standard old dipstick to check those tanks and make sure that the amount of fuel in them is what the gauge reads, etc.
Right.
And they never dipsticked it. So there were a few errors that cumulative errors that led to that crash.
Was it determined that there was an issue with the fuel gauge?
No, there not to my knowledge, and the FAA, the National Transportation Safety Board, also cleared all the gauges.
Okay.
Said the plane was in good shape.
Because that's why they have the dipstick, because you've got a fail-safe there. You've got 2 different ways to check it and make sure the gauge is working right.
Exactly.
You want to be able to kind of look in the tank and make sure that, if it says full, you want to see it full.
Right.
Wow. So the plane, obviously, somebody heard trees, and then next thing you know, it sounds like thousands of baseball bats beating on the bottom of the plane, right?
That's right. The old pilot said this plane can get down. And that plane had been around with Jerry Lee Lewis for years. And the old pilot was Les Long. He wasn't with us on this flight. But he had told me, he'd flown us for a while.
Right.
And he said, this plane, as long as there's not trees or mountains, we can land it. We'll get it down somehow. We'll get it down safely.
Right.
Well,
unfortunately,
we took it to the trees.
Yeah. Wow. Because if it had been an open field, and wasn't there a field just beyond the trees?
There was not only a field on one side of the trees, there was an open highway, 4-lane highway with no traffic.
Right.
So my thought on the way down was we're going to look awful silly 25 people hitchhiking down a freeway with a plane that's out of gas.
Yeah.
So,
wow. And out in the middle of nowhere.
Out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, in the country. Wow. And he's got more stories to tell, and I'll have him on the radio more. He lives right here in town, and also informed me today that he's got a book signing event that he's going to be doing here in town, so I'll let you know when that gets scheduled. And we will be there and hope you will too.
It's quitting time. You're putting the hammer down with Billy Kidd.